What's up, guys? My name is Anthony Sceam, and I'm back with another file breakdown for you guys. This time we're going to be going over my last release, Hustlin. I'm going to pretty much be doing these with every release. It is a heavier G-house, bass house song, really gritty bass line leads, pretty dark intro with some rap vocals on top of it. I'm going to pretty much be doing this with every track. Eventually, you know, a couple weeks or a month after the release, just breaking down the file so you guys can dig deep in my techniques and maybe evolve some stuff for you guys, learn a few things, or who knows, teach me some things in the comments. So let's hop right into it. Okay, so hopping into the project, I found myself repeating a lot of the same stuff over and over again, but in case there are new viewers here, I do like to go over things multiple times. The mix is going to sound a lot different than it did in the final version. I do a lot of my mixing and stuff like that in a separate project. I make my whole track and then I bounce my stems, and I do a big portion of my mixing in a fresh project, and I also do a lot of post-processing to my leads. So the bass line or drop or whatever the fuck you want to call it is going to sound slightly different in this than it does in the finished version, but you'll still be able to dig deep on my techniques and get an inside look at what I like to do in my production. Anyway, let's hop into this. So I had a homie of mine, Undefined, come in and just record a simple hook for this track. And this is the hook you recorded.
Doinks, there ain't no shame in hustling points. Boys, toys, they smoke if you play, just put in the coin.
And then I used this part.
Shame in hustling, there ain't no shame in hustling.
I used that part as kind of my hook.
Doink.
For the build up and stuff like that. So I just had him come in here, and then what I did there is I threw some. I did a lot of post processing on it. I did some stereo expansion, some reverb. I threw a Camel Crusher on there to make it a little bit gritty. Kind of like those gritty distorted vocals in my stuff lately. And I like really gritty distorted 808s too. That's just kind of the stuff I like. So on the intro here, I have a few elements. I keep this perk loop going throughout the entire intro. Also, sorry, I don't have my pop filter, so all my P's are gonna sound fucked. So let's go over the intro elements. I keep this perk loop pretty much going throughout the whole intro. Just kind of keeps it bouncy and keeps the rhythm. And I have these claps pretty much going throughout the whole thing too. Just claps layered. I come in heavy with a couple of my impacts that I always use, and then I also have some delay going and cutoff going on the vocals. So I just used a small little vocal chop. Oh, I gotta turn my delay back on. There we go. So I just took that tag Hustlin, because that's the name of the track. Took that tag Hustlin and just repeated it. That's kind of a technique that I use in a lot of the intros of my song. It adds that theme to it, adds that vibe to it, and it brings in the vocals nicely, in my opinion. So I have that going for the first 4 bars on top of my pad, which is just the pads that I always like using. Nice Reese pad. Just a nice simple melody that I wrote out on my keyboard, and then I have that layered with my, call it a pluck. I think I actually found this just going through the Sceam basic presets. Yeah, I did. This is a super cool, and then I tweaked a little bit, but I just went through the basic ass presets that come with Sceam, and I found this. It's super cool. It was originally a pluck, but I turned it into almost like a violin sound. I think it kind of has that nice like trap vibe after messing around with some of the LFOs or the envelopes, I mean, on there, and yeah, thought it was cool. So I just used that, layered it with this as well as my perks, and then I have my Reese pad layered with a sub bass. Kind of a distorted sub bass, so it has that low end and then it has that grittiness of a Reese pad. To make the lower pad. I really like those atmospheric elements of the Reese pads, and I like using them a lot for my intros. It's kind of my thing. And then so I progress up with this pluck that comes in here. And then that progresses as the vocal progresses as well. It's Jesus. That fucking delay is gonna kill me. I'm gonna just turn that delay off. It'll sound a little weird, but you'll get the point. So that doesn't do that every time I hit pause. Anyway, so it's a very subtle background element, but it adds to it. There ain't no shame in hustling points. Boys, And then I love this little part of this perk loop. I've used it a bunch. I love that shit. It's just super bouncy and a nice little cut. So a lot of my tracks, you will hear me heavily break into, you hear me have like almost another break that goes into the bass line, but here I kind of more seamlessly transition into the bass line, so it's not super obvious and it's almost not a break, it's more of just a transition from my intro elements to my bass line, or to my build up. So I'm still using an impact up and down to transition into it, but I'm not like completely cutting all the elements like I would to create a really energetic build-up. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding a slight cutoff to my vocals using DJM filter. Once again, really like this plugin. It's a free Xfer or transfer or whatever plugin. Totally fucking free. It replicates the filter on a CDJ, which I really like that filter. Super easy to use, and then you just automate it. So I put a slight filter on my vocals just to bring it down a little bit, and then I kind of raise that filter out, or raise that filter back out as it progresses. So I believe, let's see, where is it? I think it's this one, actually. I was going to use a smoke perp fucking vocal, but I didn't. So that's why the layer is called Smoke Perp Audi. I'm bringing a cutoff on the vocals just to kind of bring them down a little bit so you feel that transition into the build-up. So I'm just using that kind of hook from those vocals, the Hustlin hook, to once again kind of bring that theme of the track together and use that so, you know, people get it stuck in their heads, people remember it, you know what I mean? It's really good to build that theme around your track. And that's what I'm doing here, and then I'm bringing it up. But let's break down my different elements in the build up here. So I'm bringing in this snare, and that snare is once again filtered out using DJM filter. And then as the build-up progresses, that snare gets less and less filtered. So right at the first, you can just barely hear it in the background. But as that build-up brings tension, it gets defiltered, which really brings up another element. And then I'm just using my claps from the intro as well to build on them in a basic build-up fashion. I believe this is a 8-bar build-up, which is like pretty much what I always use for my build-ups, is 8 bars. And then just looping them as I would, and then I'm also looping my perk loop that I'm using here, which just brings more tension. I got a few of my risers that I like using in there to build more tension as well. I need to start linking my sample pack in the description of these because I use a lot of shit from my sample pack, and I think that kind of helps solidify my sound. So it's just those little novelties in the background of a track that, you know, people aren't really thinking about, but for whatever reason, it kind of establishes your sound. Like, for instance, deadmau5 has a really classic riser and impact that he always uses, and that, I think, is part of his signature sound, and I think that's important. So I've been using a lot of my own ones that I made for my sample pack because I like them, and I think it helps kind of distinguish that sound. And then I'm also, so for the first 4 bars of the buildup, I'm just using my basic elements with some filtering on them. And then when I start the next 4 bar of my buildup, I am looping them. So here I'm using a new pad, which is just my Reese pad that I was using before, but it's one long note for the next 3 bars. And I'm also pitching it up and filtering it. So it's almost like making a riser out of one of your intro elements. And like I say, it's always very important in your build-ups to use elements from your intro, because it adds to that overall theme of the track. It doesn't feel like you're leaving one part of the track behind. Instead, it's a smooth transition from this part of the track to the other part. And then what I'm also doing is I'm using the lead sounds for my bass line in my build-up. So I'm rendering 4 bars of the bass line sound without the kicks and stuff, just the leads, and I am using that here, and I'm filtering it. The reason I render it is because there's so many layers, and it's easier just to work with one rendered stem than it is with all the different layers and having to automate them all by themselves. So I'm starting with that pretty much not there at all, and by the end you hear it, which is this sound here. And I'm also cutting all the low end out of that as well. Then you start to hear it right about here. which once again makes it an easy, smooth transition from your intro to your drop or bass line, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Then for my vocal fill in the pre-drop, I don't fucking know. I'm using just this vocal.
There ain't no shame in hustling.
So I'm using, and there should be another one here, but I think it got deleted when I was bouncing my stems.
There ain't no shame in.
So I'm using one that's pitched down, and then I'm layering them on top of each other to create that drop fill. I'm also using some of the elements from the build-up, as well as this, because I really like that sound. And then I'm using a little bit of an impact. And then that cuts right when that drop hits in. Now let's get into the drop aspect of things. So let's just go ahead and I'll just play it out.
There ain't no shame in hustling. Hustling points.
So that's the overall drop sound. Let's dive into this sound design here. So I am using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sounds layered, but you'll hear that not all of these are leads. There's a few of them that are really taking most of the space. So one of the more main leads is this sound here. Let's go ahead and solo it, which is a really fucking cool sound. So this lead sound here is a really cool patch that I've been working on for a while, and I've used in a couple different songs when it comes to layering, but in this song, I really wanted to use it as one of my main leads. You'll hear another track coming out later this year with Mags, shout out to the fucking boy, where I use this as really one of the leads in the track. So it's a really cool deep sound. Let's solo it out. Kind of a gritty, you know, fucking trauma type bass, chommy type bass. Really like sounds like this lately. Really deep fucking gritty bass. Took all the low end out of it in the post-processing. I'll show you guys what kind of post-processing I did. Not much, just some basic EQ, taking out that low end. Like I said, I do a lot of the post-processing on my leads in my bounced project with my stems. So kickstart on there for some side chain. I also do additional side chaining, but I use this as my bass side chain, some limiting on there, and a basic EQ taking out that low end. So let's hop into the other layers here. So that is one of my more leady ones. Then this is that fucking carburetor Jaws cymatics preset that everybody uses. I really only use it for layering. It adds a little bit of high-end grit in there, and I think it is cool for certain sounds. Like I said, I really only use it for layering. I've heard a lot of people just use this for their main lead in their track. I think it's a cool sound, but it's just super generic and super old. But when it comes to layering, it sounds good. Then I have this, which is just a nice G-house stab. This is just a silent preset that I have from a G-house pack. And then I have this sound, which is something that I used in a track Reminisce a while ago. Once again, just another silent preset I found in a bank. Worked on it a little bit. Something I want to touch on that I touch on in almost every video. There's constantly a battle of should you make all your own sound design and should you use patches. And what it really comes down to is you should definitely hold the knowledge to be able to make your own sounds from scratch if you need to, because you're not always going to be able to find a preset or a patch for that exact sound that you have in your head. And having that knowledge is really important to be able to open a fresh Sceam or open a fresh whatever and make a sound from the ground up. But there's nothing wrong with using presets and patches. It's music. At the end of the day, it's just music, man. Like, make what you want to make. You know what I'm saying? But having that knowledge is really, really important. So make sure you have that knowledge to be able to make those sounds from the ground up that you want. But also, there's nothing wrong with taking a patch and engineering it and making something new with that patch. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I try to do with all my patches that I use or all my presets that I use, is just making something original, because it's going to push your sound to new levels that you wouldn't be able to achieve if you were just making the sound. You know, you never want to limit yourself. You know what I'm saying? Use the patch and just use a patch straight up how it is. It doesn't matter. Like I said, it's just fucking music. Make the music you want to make. You know what I'm saying? Fuck the politics. Anyway, getting past that, I always think that's an important part to bring up for anybody that might be watching these videos that are still learning what they're doing or are new at it. Anyway, so I have that sound. Then I have this pluck and this pluck. So you're probably gonna say, man, that's a lot of fucking sounds. But there's a lot of there's a lot of EQing that I'm doing to each one of these sounds. So they're taking up different places in my spectrum, and I'm using EQs to target different places in my spectrum so that it's a really, really full and big sound. And then a lot of them, when they're in the mix, they're gonna be background sounds. They're gonna be sounds that aren't really super in the front of the mix. They're just going to be in the background, kind of utilizing different places of my overall spectrum. The two main sounds I'd say in this are going to be that and that. those two are going to make up my lead front sounds that I'm going to be using. Then the rest of this is just kind of a background sound to add space and to add, you know, whatever. So anyway, with all those together, this is what it sounds like. And so like I said, there's a lot of cleaning up I do in the mix down process. When I bounce my stems, I make them quiet. I mix down, make them quiet, then I bounce my stems, and then I mix them up in the mix. So anyway, we'll talk about this wobble that comes in here. So here are two different sounds. So my first sound is going to be this one. Let's find this here. Just a sound that I've used, a robotic-ish wobble that I've used a lot. And then the second sound is this, which I used in an old track, Reminisce, and I kind of worked on a little bit. Let's talk about that. Just an old preset I've had for a while. I reverse engineered it and kept it in my pack of presets and patches. Kind of a robotic, a little bit more high-pitched, and then I just layered them together to make a nice full wobble with a lot of low and a lot of high end. And then I believe, let's see, am I using a sub bass on this? I'm not using a sub bass on this, so I'm just using the sub from my lower wobble there. And then I'm putting that in on these little cuts. And at the beginning, I have it really simple with just my kick and my claps, my layered claps that I was using for the intro. No perks or anything in there yet. And then I'm also, something I like to do in all my tracks is I take a little vocal chop and I like to layer it and use it for the bass line. And I think it adds a little bit of bounciness in there, and I don't know, it's just kind of something I like. Once again, sits in the back of the mix. You can't really tell it's there in full force, but sits in the back of the mix and sounds good. And then for my cuts, I am using just a vocal from the original vocals.
Hustling points.
Once again, keeping that original theme of the track name Hustlin.
Hustling points. Hustling points.
And then I'm using these little cuts with these vocal chops as well here when there's no wobble. It's kind of nice when you have elements in your parts of your track that have nothing in them. It really brings more power to when there's a lot of things in them. The absence of sound is sometimes just as powerful as sound itself. So here you're full in, you're rocking it, and then that cut comes in and it just hits back in with that next with the start of that next bar. So I think that's important. And then here I'm once again using this cut to bring in a lot of power, especially when I'm bringing this perk loop next. So and then that perk loop comes in, a lot of power in that perk loop. And once again, just kind of bringing the essence of the track. So then I continue that for another 4 bars, and then I have a full cut here. Here I have a lot longer of a bass line than I usually have. So here I cut out my kicks for a bar, and then once again use that vocal sample to bring it back in heavy. Once again, cutting those kicks makes it so when the next 4 bar comes in, it's just heavier. And then I'm using that sound from that perk loop to kind of once again transition a little bit better and really bring power to it. And then here I'm cutting my kicks, my perks, and my claps, and some of my bassline sounds with volume automation down here to kind of create a break or a cut or whatever for a bar using the vocals.
There ain't no shame in hustling points. Hustling.
So once again, that delay is not here, so this sounds a little bit weird since I have that delay turned off. But yeah, and once again, that kind of creates a break, so it's not just repetitive over and over again. And then once again, when this next half of the bass line comes in, it just has a lot more power when that comes back in. Then I'm layering my original sound, my lead sound here. Oh, no, not that one. Sorry, this one. I'm cloning that and using that again here and just bringing it up an octave. And just using that as a layer. So when this all comes back in, you hear that kind of higher sound, and it just kind of brings some freshness to the bass line you've been hearing.
Hustling.
Once again, just bringing that variation, that progression, keeping that progression going is really, really important. Here we have a more basic track with not a lot of bunch of crazy elements, but we're keeping the progression going. We're using those cuts to really keep it fresh and entertaining, and using progression to your advantage with the sounds you already have is really, really important. Something we'll dive into a little bit here that I forgot to dive into is I usually let you guys check out these sounds. So this is the lead sound. I'm just going to show you guys the 2 lead sounds. pretty basic sounds. Nothing crazy here. You know what I'm saying? Really nothing crazy here at all. We have a lot of FX here. You can check out the effects if you want to. Feel free to pause the video, copy any of it, you know, make the sound for yourself, mess around with it. No worries about ripping any sounds or anything like that. I want y'all to learn, and who knows what you'll be able to make with it. So let me try to find this other sound. This is the next lead. So if you guys know anything about Silent, which is very rare that I find people that really do, you can check out everything I'm doing here. Feel free to pause the video. Use any of this you want to if you fuck with Silence. So those are the main things I wanted to show you guys, and then I'll also show you guys the wobble that I'm using if you want to mess around with any of that. Here are the two wobbles, both Serum. Once again, pretty basic sounds, nothing crazy. Here are my effects here. Feel free to mess around with them, remake them, or whatever you want. That is the first wobble, which is this one. This is the second one, which is the bit higher one. Yeah, so there you go. Hopefully that helps any of you guys with some sound design or whatever. Let me know if any of you guys want, you know, tutorials on making any of these sounds. I'd be more than happy to make some of those. Make them from the ground up. So anyway, so we come out here. We're using another riser to bring us out of the bass line into our break. We're using those respaces to really transition back into the second break of the track. And then I also layered this pad in there, which is just kind of like a wobbly res pad. So what I'm doing there is I'm pretty sure I just used the same res pad patch. Gotta love those pops. And I am just automating the cutoff to make that wobble. And it just kind of adds a cool element. Make sure to keep it fresh. So I want to slowly progress back into things to keep it exciting, keep it fresh. So I'm just using the res pads. Then I'm progressing with my perks and my claps, my pluck, and then I progress back. Jesus. And then I progress back into my vocals. Add that pluck back in there, and then I'm progressing back into the full loop. And then using the same build-up elements from the last one. And I'm really cutting that wobbly res pad out of there during this break. And then same elements coming into it, but for this one, I changed up the patch. Once again, I like to create some variation to that second drop. I think that's really, really important. So all I did is I changed up the melody that I'm using from the original to this one. So for the first drop, we're using this. For the second, we're using this. And we're using a delayed drop. So the first bar of the bass line, or the first two bars, sorry, of the second drop or bass line or whatever you want to call it, doesn't have a kick or any perks or anything, so it's delayed. But I used one kick right at the beginning. So it comes in. So yeah. And then I'm coming right into the perks on this one here instead of waiting so long to bring the perks in. And then I have a little bit of a mix out here. So then I'm using that same Hustlin vocal pad. I'm using that same Hustlin vocal to bring it out. So once again, it kind of keeps the original theme. So that is about it. Okay, well that was it. My camera ran out of space in the middle of me recording my outro. Anyway, and so I'm in my bathroom now because that's the best lighting. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like I said, I'm going to be pretty much making these for every single release. Make sure to hit that subscribe button because I'm going to be trying to keep this channel really, really updated. If you guys want to see anything specific, just let me know. Any old tracks, anything digging deeper. My fucking alarm is, God. I don't know if you guys want any more specific content or if you want me to dig deeper into any tracks, anything I mentioned in these videos or anything else. So yeah, new music coming out with New Northern soon. Super stoked on that. And yeah, just make sure to keep up with all the socials for all the updates and shit. All right, hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.